Hey, what's up?
Nothing. What's up with you?
And I'm drinking a delicious Oberon.
Ooh,
Uh, it's a summer beer, and our topic today is very summery in the fact that we're talking baseball today. So, besides, this was basically the only thing I have left to drink in my home because my house is basically empty now. So, there's that.
well, empty and beverages.
Yeah, I have like my sink with water and beds and places to sleep. But other than that, this is my last night in Kalamazoo.
Dang. Off to lovely East Jordan.
Beautiful, scenic East Jordan, Michigan. That's right, to start this next adventure in the great northern Michigan territory, which is nice because it's pretty there and it's nice. It's looking forward to just going on my first long walk there because it's a very walkable little town.
Nice.
So,
Nice. Very nice.
and there's also a nature area like just up the block from us that I can go hiking and stuff. I know, totally awesome. I
Well,
know
you
it's
know,
really,
it's all touristy, so you gotta give the tourists what they want, which is places to walk outside in the woods.
I agree, and it's harder to do that in North Side in Kalamazoo. So
Yeah.
nothing personal to the North Side. I think what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to become a moving consultant because I'm getting really good at it. So it's like you're going to move yourself. I'm going to go ahead and plug U-Haul because I really do think that U-Haul is the best service you can go. If you're moving yourself, U-Haul has it all. I'm just saying. They have their proof in the pudding.
They do.
So,
We got it down.
mhm. So anyway, as you may not know, I'm just assuming you don't know, last week was baseball's kind of halfway point in the season. It was All-Star week last week. The All-Star game was Tuesday. The National League won 3-2, which means that the National League will now have home field advantage during the World Series.
Oh.
For the
There's
longest
limitations.
time,
Sorry.
I think Anna's easily distracted by her chickens. Yeah, so for the longest time, the All-Star game had absolutely no consequences whatsoever. It was just a fun thing. They were like, hey, look how awesome we are. And then everybody stopped watching it because we'll get to that. We'll get to the current relationship with baseball in America. It's not great. So, yeah, we'll get to that in a second. So I thought it would be fun to do a whole show today on baseball, much to your chagrin, because as we know, sportsing is not necessarily your thing.
No, I just vote for whoever who has the best costume. So.
Very good. Well, just so you know, the other big sporting event that's coming up, and I debated which one to do. Do I do baseball or do I do Women's World Cup? But I think I want to kind of wait and see how things turn out with the Women's World Cup before we do a show on it because, that is literally my all-time favorite sporting event is the Women's World Cup. And I don't like I don't like to have anybody around me when I'm watching Women's World Cup. The fact that I let you be with me when we were watching it in 2019 means that I love and care for you because you're my sister. But other than that,
we were stuck in a hotel room in Chicago. I guess you could have been like, go get a coffee, and I'd be like, okay.
Well, it was 1,000 degrees when we were in Chicago, and we basically were just hiding from the weather at that point. And it was amazing. So we were watching the semifinals against England during the shootout, or that. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I get all excited just thinking about that game because it was so good. Anyway. Let's talk about baseball. So the topic today is baseball, not just baseball itself. I do a kind of a brief history, but we also talk about baseball movies because what I've learned about baseball movies is that even everybody has seen a baseball movie and has an opinion about it, even people who aren't sports people. And I'm thinking of my cousin Sia, and I remember having this conversation with her about the movie The Rookie. So here's somebody that is not a baseball person, but she loves that movie. And I'm like, okay, something everybody can talk about. Baseball. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and bring it into the stream, and we will baseball. This is baseball and the movies that celebrate it. So I chose this topic because, as you know, baseball is one of my first loves as far as sport. Not necessarily the biggest fan to this day, but it's still something that I really enjoy. And it is near and dear to my heart historically.
I remember watching you watch the Cubs when you were in elementary school and middle school, and I was like, this only seems to make her mad. Why is she watching this? She's always screaming at the TV.
Yeah, that's pretty much what Cubs fans do. Cubs fans shout at the TV, and and that's we'll talk a little bit about 2016 as we go through this. One of my 2016, November of 2016 was literally one of my best and worst months ever, and we'll talk about why very shortly. All right, so we'll just give you a quick, for those of you that don't know baseball, here's kind of a quick overview. I chose this quote because it's one of my favorite quotes from the movie Bull Durham. This is a simple game. You throw the ball, you hit the ball, you catch the ball. And that's from Joe Skip Riggins, who's the manager of the Durham Bulls in the movie Bull Durham. And
lollygaggers. You lollygag to first base. You lollygag to second base. What does that make you, Jenny?
Lollygaggers. Lollygaggers.
Sorry.
So I'm getting ahead of myself, but I talk about the fact that Bull Durham is one of the most quotable movies of all the baseball movies. So, all right. So a brief history of baseball. Baseball is a simple game. It really is. It's a bat and ball game. It evolved in the United States from other European bat and ball games. The myth of American baseball is that it was invented by Abner Doubleday in 1839 in Cooperstown, New York, but that's not actually true. He would be the first to tell you that he didn't. That's not part of his biography, but it's attributed to him. But what are you going to do? There were actually versions of baseball being played in America well before the 19th century. There's no real clear origins of baseball. You had the Knickerbocker rules that emerged in the middle part of the 19th century, which are kind of the modern rules of baseball. And they were first published, I think, in 1845. But the truth is, the origins of baseball are sketchy at best. If you look at the history of European games, the closest game to baseball is an English game called rounders, which is essentially baseball, except instead of being played on a square, it's played in a circle, and you go the other way instead of running, you run clockwise instead of counterclockwise. So, which I think is hysterical. So the English are like, whatever, America, it's simply nothing more than rounders, or some other game like something with the Tillywubber,
I think that's actually rugby.
Oh, right. It's going to have some English name that people can be like, yes, quiet, yes, So, but anyway, baseball was dubbed America's pastime because of its popularity in times of trouble, such as the Civil War or the Great Depression. And it really emerged in popularity amongst people at this point because it was really cheap and easy to play, because you just needed some space, a stick, a ball, and something to act as bases in a home plate. Because when baseball first emerged, there were no mitts or anything. You just played with your bare hands. So you didn't need a lot of money or anything to play. You just needed some bodies. And a lot of people could play all at once. So if you had a group of soldiers, you could get a lot of them involved, and that was kind of part of the camaraderie of it. So that's why it started to gain in popularity, especially during the Civil War. As far as the logistics, this is a baseball field, baseball diamond as it's known, and that's because of the diamond shaped in the infield. There's 3 bases, there's home plate, the red arrows there show you which way you run the bases. Bases are 90 feet, the pitcher's mound to home plate is 60 feet, 6 inches. You have 2 batter's boxes on each side, you have a catcher's box. The object is to hit the ball within these foul lines on first base and third base, and to score runs. You have to advance 1 base at a time, or as many bases as you can without being tagged out, blah, blah, blah. So.
And you have to go. They go from first to third. Gotta go.
You gotta go to you gotta go first, second, third. You can't just run across the diamond to second base,
Yeah.
You have to go in order.
Really
it's pretty straightforward once you play it. The rules are not, actually there's a lot of rules to baseball. One of the things I'll talk about is the minutia, or the idea of little things making big things in baseball, because there's so much minutia to this game. The rule book is actually pretty extensive, and it has evolved over the years. Now, for the longest time, and I think if you look at American baseball, for the longest time in this country, and I think Annie Savoy hits the nail on the head in Bull Durham, the fact that for the, at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, and especially through the middle part of the 20th century, baseball was a religion in this country. You might even say some people that really study it and are really into the statistical portion of the game, it's cultish in terms of people's love of baseball. I would say I love baseball. I would not say I am part of the religion or the cult of baseball. It never went that far for me. But the reason that America was fascinated with baseball is it's considered wholly American. Yes, you had all these other games in England, but this particular form of bat and ball games emerged as America was starting to emerge as a powerful nation. So as America rose in power in the late 19th and early 20th century, the popularity of baseball rose as well because it became this symbol of American greatness. Baseball is an American game. America is great. We love baseball, and so that's really what it became. And the other part about baseball is that though it is a team sport, you have the opportunity for individual greatness. When you're at the plate, it's basically you versus the pitcher at that point. And because you have the ability to stand out in that moment, those people that stood out the most became mythical in stature. And of course, the best example of that in American baseball is probably Babe Ruth. What was more American than, the Babe? And if you look at the movie 61, which chronicles kind of the home run race between Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle, as they were chasing Babe Ruth's home run record, you saw how important Babe Ruth was to not just the New York Yankees, but to all of baseball in general. That's why Roger Maris got so much shit for breaking the record. There's an air of civility to baseball that's absent from such sports as football. So back in that time, as America was trying to become more cosmopolitan, more civilized, there was something about baseball that it wasn't brutish like something like football, even though the men that played baseball were just as big of brutes and assholes as any other type of athlete. Let's not kid ourselves. Now, did you watch The Natural?
I didn't get to The Natural.
Okay, but The Natural, one of the things I like about that particular movie, that movie takes place in, I think, 1936, and it's fun because you have people that still dress for the baseball game. You have men in their shirts and ties, and you have women that are all dressed up to go to the baseball game. And that was that part of that civility that you dressed to go to the games back in the old days. So
I watched the Theater Only was the same thing. I dressed up to go to the baseball games.
Exactly. So, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, it was like there's this one scene where one of the big owners, his wife is with him, and she's got her hat and her gloves on, and she's eating a hot dog, while she's
there. Their own, yes.
Yeah. So, that was, I thought that you saw the same thing there.
Totally. In its early years, it wasn't a rich man's game. Like I said, it didn't require money to play. You needed space, you needed players, you needed ball and stick. And it was a big way that communities were able to work together. You saw a lot of towns with wherever their big factories were, there were teams, mill teams especially. Like if you look at like Shoeless Joe Jackson, Shoeless Joe Jackson got his start as a mill player. He worked the mills when he was a little boy in South Carolina, and he was talented enough that they asked him to start playing on the mill team early. And so you had these mill teams in one town competing with the mill teams in the other towns, and that's a lot of how it became a sort of a civic pride to have a good baseball team. And so it was one of the ways that communities rallied behind their teams, and that was a really great way that communities competed with one another. And at the time, it was a sport that matched the pace of life. Baseball is not a fast game. I'll talk a little bit about America's ending its love affair with baseball, and that's back in the day that was a good thing because the pace of this nation was slower. it allowed for social interaction. What's cool about a baseball game is that there's lots of time to talk during a baseball game. You have some pitch, you have some action, and then you have time in between pitches to chit chat. Hey, what's going on? This is happening. You can look at stuff. There's always something dumb happening between innings. That's always really nice. And so at a time when there's no TV and few distractions, a baseball game was a great way to spend, an entire afternoon. So as far as my love affair with baseball, for me, it started when I was really young. It was the first sport that I was allowed to play. I had to do my 3 years of mandatory ballet, and then after that, I was allowed to play baseball. And it was the first sport that I was really good at. However, I was not good at it at first. So the first year I played coach pitch, I wasn't very good. But it was the first time I really learned the value of practice. And I saw that value in the progress I made from my first year when I was on Navy to my second year, which was when I was on the Royal team. And that really meant something to me because I did spend a lot of time by myself practicing. So that in all of that time between my first year and my second year, I saw this huge jump in improvement, which is a big deal for me. Joe Peters is with us, and he says the only church that truly fills the soul day in and day out is the Church of Baseball. That is from Annie Savoy. That is the opening of Bull Durham when she is talking to us about the Church of Baseball. She ain't wrong. And as far as why else I love baseball is it gave me a label as something other than a tomboy. When I was playing, I wasn't a tomboy. I was a ball player. I liked that I could practice baseball by myself. Baseball practice, especially if I was practicing alone, was a place where I could hide. I could hide in baseball practice. I could just be outside by myself, throwing the ball against the wall. And then when mom got tired of that, I could still practice just by throwing the ball up in the air and catching it over and over and over and over and over and over again. And that's exactly what I did. Watching the Cubs on WGN out of Chicago is how I learned the game. I didn't know the rules of baseball, until I started playing, but I started watching the Cubs before I started playing baseball. And that's how I learned the rules of the game. I learned what a force out was. I learned why, if somebody, the difference between somebody needing to be tagged or a force out. I learned why you bunt. I learned that you don't have to swing and a miss just to have a strike. I learned about the strike zone. I learned all these little different things of the game that I didn't know and understand before that. So that's why I was a Cubs fan. I was a Cubs fan because we got WGN out of Chicago, and I could watch baseball every single day in the summertime. So it was amazing. And that was back in the day before Cubs had night games. So every Cubs game that was a home game was on in the afternoon. So I always hated it when the Cubs traveled because then they were night games, and that was stupid because then I couldn't watch them because mom didn't like baseball. Baseball is the embodiment of my most cherished truth. And that's that little things make big things. That's the truest thing I know. It's true in science. It's true in your daily life. Little things make big things. And that is incredibly true in baseball. The littlest part of your swing that's off, it means you're going to hit a weak ground ball or a weak pop-up, or you're going to miss entirely versus hitting a home run or versus hitting a smoke and line drive. It's some little tiny thing. Your footwork is going to be the difference between making a catch or missing by another foot. It's all of these little things. And if you get really good enough at the little things, then you become an excellent, really whole, great baseball player. And that's true in any sport, but for some reason it feels even more important in baseball where you fail so much of the time. If you're a 300 hitter, you're an amazing hitter, but you're still failing 70% of the time, which is the tough part about baseball. I loved it when I was a little girl, when Dad would have time to have a catch with me, or he would take me to Congress Street School so that we could do hitting practice. And that wasn't very often, maybe once a week, because he would come home from work and then he'd go do furnace stuff. And baseball is the place where I learned to deal with adversity. Turns out that when you're working through a hitting slump when you're 10 or 9 is an important life skill. So, when you're really good and you're hitting the ball and then all of a sudden you start striking out, you can quit, or you can figure out why this is happening and then figure out how to fix it, which is what I did, So it's pretty cool. Yay, baseball.
Yay, baseball.
Yep. So the current relationship with baseball, America is falling. It's no longer America's pastime. Baseball, I'm not saying it's over in America. There's still plenty of people that love baseball, but it's in terms of its relationship, it's not what it used to be. So in terms of sports that people watch, 74.5% of sports fans watch football, 56% watch basketball. Baseball now ranks third in popularity with 50%, and that number is falling. And the big complaint amongst baseball fans is that baseball is boring. I'm like, it can be. It does not have the action of football, which has a lot of downtime. It doesn't have the action of basketball or hockey, and it's become a more international sport. We're no longer dominant at baseball. You're seeing other nationalities. The Dominicans they dominate Major League Baseball now. Yes, Americans are still very dominant in baseball as well, but you have other nationalities that are very competitive, the Cubans, the Dominicans, the Japanese, and as a result of that, that dominance has sort of filtered through into Major League Baseball, so it's not as popular. And the other big thing is now baseball is very costly. If you're going to be a baseball player, it means you're doing travel ball. It means that you have to invest, if you have kids, that you're investing huge amounts in them to play baseball. That idea that you could show up in a pair of jeans and a t-shirt and play Little League, even little type teams now have full uniforms instead of just jeans and t-shirts. So that part has really kind of changed people's attitude. And what it comes down to is that we are so distracted that we don't have, instead of, there being one thing to do, now there's tons of things to do. And baseball is not one of those things that people are looking at anymore. So those things that made baseball awesome 100 years ago, people are less interested in those things or less capable of being interested in those things now. So, sorry, baseball. All right.
Businesses, doing teams. Like, you don't have mill teams anymore. You don't have all this, it's just not something that people aren't playing as much baseball. So.
No. They're not playing as much baseball. They're not as interested in baseball. And you're seeing a real disparity in terms of America. For a long time, you had the Negro Leagues in America. You had black men playing baseball, and you don't see that as much anymore. There are not as many black American players as there were even 100 years ago. And again, it's because it's become economically more difficult for people to play. And so if you don't have a lot of really good financial circumstances, you're not going to choose baseball. You're going to choose sports that are less expensive for you to play. And you're seeing more places in the inner cities that don't have fields available to kids. You have basketball courts, you have places where you can play football, but you don't have what you need in order to play baseball. And as a result of that, you're seeing baseball's popularity wane. But this is the funny thing, though. As baseball popularity wanes, the popularity of softball continues to skyrocket. So even though Americans aren't necessarily watching as much baseball as they used to, they're playing more softball than ever. So, which I think is hilarious. So you have, recreational softball, which is one of the most popular sports in America. In fact, the highest injury rate of sports in America is recreational softball. So, yeah. All right. So let's talk about movies because, in terms of pop culture, baseball has a storied history in pop culture. And so let's talk movies. Now, there are a lot of movies to work through when it comes to baseball, and I've seen a bunch of them. So I would consider this to be a must list. Now, this is in no particular order. I chose two of these movies that I would consider to be the best of the best of the best. And so this is my list. I believe Bull Durham, The Natural, Field of Dreams, League of Their Own, Moneyball, 42, Sugar, 8 Men Out, The Sandlot, Everybody Wants Them, Major League, The Bad News Bears, The Rookie, and Benchwarmers are a must list. Like if you're going to baseball, these are some really good movies that do a good job of either they're about baseball or they use baseball in the story or yeah. Joe says that's because baseball is big. So you're saying that baseball has become un-American because of the foreign players? Is that what you're saying, Joe Peters? I'm just curious. So yeah. Well, I think this is a really good list, and they cover different topics. Like I would say some good historical ones. Like 42 is essentially the Jackie Robinson story, which is fantastic. 8 Men Out is about the Black Sox scandal of 1919, where you had the Chicago White Sox that lost the World Series to the Cincinnati Reds. And of course, it turns out that there were 8 players who were essentially banned from baseball because it came out that they actually threw the 1919 World Series. That's where Joe Jackson comes in. Though he was accused of throwing, of being one of these 8 men, in reality, there's actually no statistical evidence to show that they did that. He had 12 hits in the series, which is the highest number of hits in any World Series. He batted .375. He had the series' only home run, and he didn't have any errors in that series. So there's a lot of speculation about his testimony because they were actually tried for this. They were tried for fraud. And so this is a pretty good movie because it's based on the book that's written called 8 Men Out. Good movie, sad story. And it kind of just goes to show you how things have changed in baseball. Back in, you have players now that have 10-year, $300 million contracts. Back in 1919, most of these guys were playing enough. They maybe could support a small family. They did not make a lot of money. Your everyday players just did not. So, and it kind of showed you just how the owners just ruled the league back in the day. Now, as far as the best of the best of the best, I got to go with Bull Durham. And I thought long and hard. We decided a couple of weeks ago that we were going to do this show. And so I watched as many baseball movies as I could over the last couple of weeks, actually rewatched. There's only a couple that I hadn't seen previously. Sugar, which is about a Dominican player. I hadn't seen that one before. And I had not seen the movie Everybody Wants Some, which is a Richard Linklater movie. It's kind of it's like Dazed and Confused for baseball. And it's about a minor league team. It's pretty good. It's slow going, pretty, enjoyable. So, but the rest of these movies I've seen, so I watched a lot of them again because I just wanted to make sure that I thought what I thought. And I guess I've kind of always felt this way about Bull Durham. I think it's the best baseball movie ever. Here's why. Number one, it's the antithesis of The Natural. There's a lot of parallels between Bull Durham and The Natural, and I think when they were making Bull Durham, they did that on purpose. Because if you watch The Natural is a really good story. It's very fairy tale in essence. It's not what you think it's going to be. It's still got some really dark moments in it. The Natural does, but there's a lot of really fun parallels. Annie Savoy in Bull Durham versus Bobby Savoy, who's the bat boy in The Natural, and of course Roy Hobbs, Robert Redford's character in The Natural, hits the final home run using Bobby Savoy's bat, the Savoy Special. I'm like, the first time I saw Bull Durham, I'm like, Annie Savoy, are you kidding? You have this nice moment in The Natural where Roy breaks his bat at his last at bat. They're trying to win the pennant, and Bobby comes up and gets his broken bat from him, and he's like, Bobby, go pick me out a winner. And, Bobby runs to the dugout. He picks up the Savoy Special, the bat that Bobby Savoy made himself with his own 2 little hands. He runs it over to Roy, and then Roy hits the home run. You're like, it's amazing. And then you have this moment in Bull Durham where, crashes that bat, and he's got 2 strikes on him, and he calls for the rosin rag, and the little bat boy runs over, and he's like, get a hit, Crash. And Crash just looks at him, and he's like, shut up. It's amazing. I absolutely love that moment, and I loved it even more when I rewatched The Natural, and then I watched a Bull Durham after it. And I'm just like, God, that's so funny. So I like it because it's not just Bull Durham. It's not just a great baseball movie. It's just a great movie. It's super quotable. It's aged well. And I think it does a really good job of capturing the agony of baseball. Baseball is like golf in the sense that you fail and fail and fail. And then when you finally something goes right, oh, I feel so good. And then, but if it doesn't happen enough, then you live in this agony of this game that you love that is so effing hard to be really good at. And we see that when Nuke is called up to the major leagues and he goes to find Crash to tell him he's made it, and Crash is drunk and he's playing pool and he's lamenting on the fact that he could have gone to the majors if he would have just had one more ground ball with eyes or one more little flare single a week and he is in the majors. But baseball is cruel in that respect because, you have to be good, but you also have to be lucky. You can hit the ball hard 100 times, but if you hit it right at somebody and they make the catch, you're out just the same, no matter how well you hit the ball. So not only do you have to hit the ball, the ball has to go where there's nobody else, and that's part of the agony of it. Bull Durham captures the weirdness of the cult of baseball, which I love. Annie's short monologue at the beginning, which Joe kind of quoted in the comments, it discusses the church, why baseball is her church of choice. I just think that is genius. That is genius writing to open the movie. That's literally how the movie starts. And it lets you know what you're in for, I think, right away. And it's wonderful. Baseball movies are ultimately love stories. And I think this movie captures this on many levels. And then it goes beyond to touch on the idea that love is not always beautiful and it can be really hurtful as well. So I think this is the best baseball movie ever made, which is hard for me because the close second is A League of Their Own. And I think League of Their Own is the second best baseball movie ever made. And this is very debatable. If I'm a man, I probably don't necessarily feel this way about A League of Their Own being the second best baseball movie ever. But as a woman, this is the first or second best baseball movie. But if you're a dude, you can still love this movie. This movie hit me on a personal level as a woman, as a ball player, as a sister. Again, it's not just a great baseball movie. It's a great movie. Marla Hooch, one hitter.
All right, Marla, to the left. Oh.
Yeah, and the scenes that are some of the most emotional for me are the ones that include Marla. Because, Marla, right off the bat, we see this young woman who is so good at baseball, and because she's, considered unattractive, she might not get this opportunity. And you just feel for her. Because there's, there are a lot of ugly women that play baseball, and it's the fact that, or softball or whatever. And I'm like, dude, it has to be more than just what you have here. And so that's the scene where she's saying goodbye to her dad, chokes you up. The scene where she meets Nelson, and she's singing a Nelson, ain't I, baby? So Marla Hooch is my favorite character in the movie, and it makes the movie, to me, is. I was sad to see her, she gets married and she leaves the team, and you're just like, no, Marla, come back, you're the best. I think in this movie, Penny Marshall tells a great story. It needed to be told. A lot of people did not know about the All-American Girls Baseball League until this movie came out, and it really put this league on the map, and I think shined a light on this important league that was groundbreaking for women. There's parts of the movie that are not awesome. To this day, the opening scene with older Gina Davis and the closing scene with the older ladies at the Hall of Fame is sweaty and awkward for me. And that's a bummer. That's the only part of the movie that's not great. Again, this movie is incredibly quotable. The "There's No Crying in Baseball" scene is iconic. It is part of American pop culture, regardless of whether you're a ball player or not. Everybody knows that scene. Everybody knows that line. It's used in everything. There's no crying in baseball. There's no crying in this. There's no crying in cooking. It's just, it gets used again and again. I literally have every second of that scene memorized. She's crying, sir. Sorry. Again, you don't have to be baseball player to connect to this movie. And again, the scene on the bus where Doris is talking about how people thought she was a weird girl or a strange girl just so she could play. That sums up my childhood, is that, I wore the label of tomboy my entire life, which I fucking hated. And I hated the fact that I couldn't just be a girl who was good at baseball or was fast or was athletic. I had to be a fucking tomboy. Why did I have to be labeled as a boy? I'm not a fucking boy. It made me so mad.
Sorry.
So, I'm a girl who just happens to be a really good athlete and who has worked very hard to become a good baseball player. Fuck all of you. Sorry. That bothered me. But that sums up my childhood. And I was made to feel weird all the time, but I wasn't weird. I was just really good at this. And there were other girls out there that were good at this too. So yeah. So Ann Brothers, this is the part where we're going to stop and we're going to talk about your thoughts on baseball and baseball movies. I've given you my talk for the last half hour. Now it's your turn.
I don't play baseball. I never played baseball. I used to watch you play baseball. I never wanted to play baseball.
Mom made you.
I'm not a sports person. I was always really proud of you for being a good baseball player. I always thought it was cool that you were a good baseball player. And that's why I went to your games. I mean, I couldn't be less interested in watching them. But I was impressed and proud of the fact that I had a sister who people knew because she played baseball. And I thought that was cool. That's all I ever really wanted to do with it. I didn't want to watch it with you. I didn't want to practice with you. I was glad that I didn't have to practice with you. I also liked that you were a tomboy, even though I don't even think I ever called you a tomboy, just because Jenny was a super good athlete and super smart and a really good student. I didn't have quite as much going for me, but I was girly. And so Jenny was not girly, and I was better at being girly than Jenny. So I had its own pitfalls, but at least I was like, hey, as long as Jenny wants to play sports, I'm the pretty one, which really wasn't true anyway, but I had first. So anyway, totally digress. So baseball. I enjoyed baseball movies. I mean, how can you not? Especially if it's a well-told story. I have to agree. I haven't seen Bull Durham since, probably the first time I saw it. Maybe I saw it once, it came out in 87? I think.
Yeah. Yep.
I think I saw it once or twice, and I really loved the movie. I mean, I love Danny's voice. I was like, her whole sense of fashion and style. Please, that was 100% me. But just rewatching it again last week, I was like, the movie is aged amazingly well. I was like, this is just a really good movie. How come this isn't in my top 5 movies? It's a great movie. You know what I really like about, sometimes when you watch sporting movies, there's this, especially with football movies, which I don't like to watch, there's this level of toxic masculinity in sports movies sometimes. It's just like, there's none of that in Bull Durham. It's just this, these guys, like you said, this heartbreaking, they're all walking around with a broken heart, and it's because of baseball. Like, yeah, I just love that about that movie. It taught me more about baseball. It's like, I can see why people love it. Again, if I went back and forth between Bull Durham and League of Their Own, I think Bull Durham is a better movie than League of Their Own. League of Their Own made me want to cry. I'm on the verge of tears the entire time, practically. I agree. The first scene and the last scene are a little cringy because they're just not well performed. Yeah, but I mean, the in-between part is just, oh man, I love that movie. I mean, it's just, everybody did a great job with their performances. It breaks your heart a little bit, breaks your heart a lot. How hard they had to work just to play baseball. And that was that time period where every single woman, whether she was playing baseball or in a factory or whatever she was doing something that probably would not have been allowed of her a few years earlier. And just, that whole time of World War II and this upheaval, It was just another example of, hey, look at women can do, ooh, that's scary. But it's a great story. And, Tom Hanks is hilarious. Some of it, like you said, some of it is a little cringy, I think, just because of what we would consider funny, what was considered funny when it was made, and what we probably don't consider as funny now. And of course, they really didn't address anything at all about how African Americans couldn't even play that, So, that was, I wish, doing a movie about that would be interesting. I'm not saying they should have done it, but now we think about it more. They touched on it a little bit, so I guess that was more.
Well, and if you look at the League of Their Own series, which is on Prime, they do address that, both the LGBTQT plus portion, the side of women's sports, as well as there's a black woman in the story. She's very much part of the story in the series, and it's like it feels like Prime is kind of trying to right that wrong that we see in League of Their Own. But again, in 1992, when League of Their Own came out, that's not something that Hollywood was doing at that time, for sure. We're just going to skip over. We're going to skate over that and just tell this other story. So, yeah.
So I do agree. That was my first and second movie. Then I watched Moneyball, which I watched when it first came out because I heard an interview with the Billy Bean.
Billy Bean,
yep. Is that his name? Yep. I heard an interview with him on Terry Gross, and it was fascinating. The interview was fascinating. So I did watch the movie because I really enjoyed his interview. And the thing is, I didn't remember very much about the movie other than Brad Pitt was in it, and that he throws a lot of stuff. And so rewatching it this time, I realized why I didn't remember the movie very much, and that I had just watched League of Their Own, where these women had worked so hard just to play some ball. And then I watched this man dismantle baseball into a totally different game about numbers and get a little tiny bit of pushback from a coach and some people going, oh, that's a bad idea. But he got to spend millions of dollars reworking this and got a little, I was like, and yet you can't have a female coach in baseball. I'm like, wow, how great is it to be a white man where you can literally take a $1 million team. I know it's not as rich as other teams, but tens of millions of dollars, totally re-fuck everything, and make a movie about you, and you get like a little bit of pushback. I was like, well, in the meantime, we can't even have, I'm like, oh, a woman could never be. Here's a guy who didn't graduate from high school, was a failed baseball player, and then got to blow millions of dollars on a cockamamie idea. You never let women or brown people do that. Sorry. So that's why I forgot about the movie.
All right. So Anne had some thoughts about Moneyball.
Thoughts about Moneyball. You want to know why people don't want to watch baseball anymore? It's boring. And you know why? Because we're too busy counting numbers. Which brings me to the fourth baseball movie I saw, which really isn't a baseball movie, but it has baseball in it, a premises in it. And that's the M. Night Shyamalan movie, Signs.
Okay.
Because one of the characters, Marshall, I think his name is, played by Joaquin Phoenix, had 5 minor league records for home runs, and also had the minor league record for strikeouts. Several things. One, he needed Danny Savoy, because if Danny Savoy had been there to mentor him, he would be, playing for the Mets. I thought it was interesting that here's a man who has these 2 diametric records. He should be playing in professional ball because that dude will sell hot dogs and beer. Why? Because people are going to go and see him either hit home runs or strike out. It's fun, exciting, and that's what we're lacking in baseball now. So he should have been in. He should have been in the major leagues. Somebody should have taken a chance on him because he's gonna be awesome either fucking way. And people are gonna come and see that. So that's my opinion.
I would agree. I think what you said, because felt wrong not to swing. Well said, Andrew. And I would agree. That's one of the biggest complaints about sabermetrics, because not only are you using statistics and sabermetrics to evaluate players, but you also manage in that respect. You know, you look at the metrics of players, you shift your defense. And so what you've seen in the last 15 years is you've seen offensive output in the major leagues go down, because you're now defending players completely differently. You're closing the gaps of where they normally hit. You're forcing a completely different type of baseball, and people have not responded well to that. What you said is true, Ed. People want home runs. People want big scores. People don't want to see pitchers' duels. As Crash Davis tells us in Bull Durham, strikeouts are boring and they're fascist. So
I'm like, so there you go. I'm like, there's an example of, I'm like, there you go. Thanks, Billy Bean. You totally like ruined baseball. And if we had more of a mindset of getting, this, the strikeout king, and the home run king, same fucking man, two different crowns. I'm like, that sells hot dogs, that sells popcorn, that sells beer.
Well, that's why the Babe is so legendary. That's why Babe Ruth is so legendary, because the dude hit home runs. That's why we lost our minds during when Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa were chasing Roger Maris's record back in '98. America stopped everything to watch these two guys hit baseballs 500 feet. And yes, they were all jacked up on drugs and steroids and all of the performance enhancing stuff. And you know what? We did not care.
We didn't care. I was like, you know what? Nobody wants to take a statistics class. Why? Because it's boring.
Yes.
So
home runs are not.
As a non-baseball person, somebody from outside looking in, I'm like,
all I know is that the first time I saw a major league home run, it was when I went to see my first Cubs game, and Leon Durham hit a 3-run home run. And I'll tell you what, you cannot believe how, when a hitter gets a hold of one and you know it's going out, the hair on your neck, back of your neck, literally stands up, because you just, as soon as it leaves the bat, it's just like, whoa. It's different too. You don't get that sound or that feel when you're watching it on TV. You see that live and somebody jacks one, it's just like, doo!
Yeah. So yeah, so that's my so those are the movies I watched. There you go.
All right, so these are my baseball movies that I think you can skip. So hang on, I gotta put this on the thing there. Okay, number 1, Trouble with the Curve. And I effing hated this movie. I had not watched it. This was one of the movies that I had watched during the past 2 weeks. There's something about a movie with Clint Eastwood and Justin Timberlake that did not appeal to me. It is, and I know there are people that really love this movie. I think it's a terrible movie. And I think it's cliched, it's trite, it's insulting to old people, it's insulting to women, it's insulting to just if you have a brain. It's so, don't watch that movie. I just think it's terrible. Yes, we know, Clint Eastwood, you're an old guy. Yes, you don't have to run around telling us how old you are all the time. We get it. It's the opposite of Moneyball, in the sense that Moneyball will tell you that scouts don't know everything, and this movie's like, scouts know everything, and sabermetrics is stupid, and all of that. It's just not a very good movie. There's no chemistry between any of the characters. Skip it. For Love of the Game, which is a Kevin Costner baseball movie. Oh, by the way, Kevin Costner is my baseball movie MVP, because he's been in some good ones. Of course, Field of Dreams is one of the best baseball movies ever. I didn't really talk about it in this, but if you have any sort of soul. And Joe and I have actually been to the Field of Dreams in Dyersville, Iowa. It's worthwhile, super fun, interesting. For Love of the Game is terrible. It's about Kevin Costner plays, I can't think of his name. He's a at the end of his career, Detroit Tigers pitcher who's in the midst of a perfect game, and he keeps thinking about all the mistakes he made with his love life, and it's terrible. The Sandlot 2. The Sandlot is a great baseball movie. The Sandlot 2, not so much. Any Major League after the original? Did you watch Major League at all?
I watched it when I was like in high school, and I was afraid to watch it again because I was like, oh, this is going to be bad. But in a racist, misogynist, still funny way.
It's not bad. It's not bad. And again, very quotable. The best line in that movie is like one of the pitchers who's a born again Christian. He's like, you trying to tell me that Jesus Christ can't hit a curveball is one of the funniest lines ever in a baseball movie.
Of course he could.
Yeah, no, it's racist and it's it spends a lot of time stereotyping, but still funny, still very quotable, still terribly misogynist and it's in that sort of awfulness. But any major league after the original, skip it. When I went to Eastern and I lived in Jones Goddard, pretty much every Friday I would go down to the third floor and hang out with these guys that would watch that movie every Friday night. And again, that's one of those movies that I've literally memorized it. The movie Rookie of the Year, terrible. Mr. Baseball, terrible. Mr. 3000, terrible. Now, 61 was a tough one for me. I rewatched 61. It was a movie that was made by HBO. Billy Crystal directed it. God, that was like 20-some years ago. And again, it chronicles the year in which Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris were chasing Babe Ruth's home run record. It's a good story. It's a poorly made movie, which is a bummer for me. If you want to know a little bit about the history of that particular chase and how difficult things were for Roger Maris during that home run chase, then by all means, it's a good historical biography of it. It's just not a very well-made movie, and that annoys me. Angels in the Outfield is terrible. Cobb is terrible. Now, Benchwarmers, as you might recall, was also on my must list. It's a stupid movie, and it's so dumb, but it's also kind of funny. So it's kind of a stupid, fun baseball movie, but it's also a baseball movie that you can absolutely skip. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so those are my movies that you can skip. There's more baseball movies out there, but these are the ones that I just don't think are particularly good. I want to like them. I want to like all movies about baseball, but not all of them are necessarily worth sharing. Whew. So there you go.
Oh, it's a lot of work, Jenny Brothers.
So, Ann, do you feel like you've learned a great game of baseball?
I'll probably never really appreciate it. Whenever I'm forced to go to a live game, I always try to make sure you're there with me because I read during the game. And if somebody hits a home run in my direction, I know you'll catch it, so I won't have a concussion or some sort of.
Now, as far as professional baseball, I'm not a huge fan of pro baseball anymore. I really enjoyed going to Rockies games when I lived out in Colorado. And half the appeal of going to a Rockies games is if you sit over in the upper deck of the right field seats and you go to an evening game, you can watch a beautiful sunset while you watch the game, and that's super lovely. But for me, as I've gotten older, Joe, no.
Duncan, did you see that?
No, what happened?
No.
Joe Peters heard that Duncan wants to be a catcher. No, Joe, bad Joe. No.
Bad Joe.
You one. That's a never say, Joe.
Exactly. That's a never say.
That's a never say, old man.
Wow. Okay. Anyway, if you're going to go see baseball, my recommendation is if you're going to become a baseball fan, go to high school baseball games, go to college baseball games. There are many. You're starting to see the reemergence of small teams again. Michigan's got a good minor league baseball scene. Kalamazoo's got teams. Grand Rapids has teams. Traverse City has a team. So that's one of the nice things. When we were living in Dresser, Wisconsin, Osceola, right down the road from us, had a local team. Fun, most of the time you can go for free or a donation, and there's hot dogs and there's raffles and there's all kinds of dumb stuff. So Major League Baseball has lost me because of the amounts of money that players are making, the commitments that cities are being asked to make for stadiums. It's outrageous, but I still really like the game. And I really do just love going to a high school baseball game or a high school softball game. I do enjoy the minor league stuff. And if your town happens to have a baseball team, go support it. It's fun. It's a great way to spend an evening. And so I highly recommend watching baseball that way. It feels, you'll just feel better about the game as opposed to watching the nonsense that happens at the major league level, in my opinion. So there you go.
Cool.
Yeah. So Ann Brothers, here we are on the 16th of July. What next?
I think we should talk about someone somewhere, somebody
Yeah,
somewhere.
I was hoping you'd say that. That's what I want. Okay. Jeff Hiller, I know you're probably not watching this, but I'm coming after you again. Okay, I'm coming after you. I want you on the show. So I will do my part to get you on the show. So, if you happen to sneak by this broadcast on your feed, just know that we would love to have you. And then, Ann, we need to get Bailey on here for the Detroit History Club.
We do. We totally do.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to be doing a Detroit History Club thing next Sunday, but I don't think Bailey is. I don't think she's leading it. We're doing a cemetery tour in Detroit, a Woodlawn Cemetery tour. But on the August 18th, I am attending a lecture at the Detroit History Club Clubhouse on the suffragettes from 6:30 to 8. And Bailey is the one, she's speaking at it. So I'll talk to Bailey and see what we can come up with.
That would be cool. So yeah, we'll be talking about the show 2 weeks from today, which is what? Sunday, July 30th. The 30th. We will be talking about the HBO series Somebody Somewhere, which is fabulous. And we want to share this with you.
Watch both seasons. I'm like, yay, I'm going to rewatch both seasons.
I will do that as well because I can. So, well done, Ann Brothers. Thanks for listening to me talk for such a long time about baseball.
Hey, I learned some stuff. Did I? I don't know. Probably not.
That's right. You don't have to.
What I did learn is that Bull Durham is an awesome movie, and I'm really glad I rewatched it because now it's going to be like in my top 5 movies. And like now I know where I'm like, oh my god. See, when I was 17, I saw Annie Savoy, and I'm like, I've been trying to dress like her ever since. So.
Well said. Yes, and I believe it is the best baseball movie ever made. Of course, that is debatable. That's why you have countdown lists or bests of or things like that, because then people get to talking about it and they can argue about it. But I've given you my reason why I believe that Bull Durham is the best baseball movie ever made. There you go. Okay.
There you go.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this fine Sunday. I know you guys are all out doing your summer stuff, which is great. But we are going to be continuing on Facebook and the YouTube, but we're going to be maybe expanding. We are working to expand and move our podcast to Spotify. So just know that changes are coming.
Instagram. We're going to do more Instagram stuff.
Instagram, Spotify, and we're going to be chopping up some of our broadcasts and putting some of our stuff on the TikTok as well. What? So, well.
Young kids. By the time we get out, it'll be kind of something else. So
I know we'll have to figure out what the cool kids are. The cool kids aren't watching us anyway. That's fine. That's not our audience. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you guys on the 30th for Somebody Somewhere. Peace.
Bye.
Bye.